Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Ezekiel sent me notes, and Steve, check out the story from Ann Arbor, Michigan. Ann Arbor's a neat little town. It's where the University of Michigan is located. Ann Arbor agrees to class action settlement, giving people $1 if their car tires were chalked. Ryan Stanton wrote this for MLive.com. And you'll recall, I did a series of stories a couple years ago about the situation in Saginaw, Michigan. Saginaw, the parking enforcement people had gone around chalking tires if you were in a 2-hour spot because they'd want to make sure that you moved your car at the end of the 2 hours. Because some people simply come by and just refeed the meter, and that's not technically legal. The signs actually said 2-hour parking. And if you overstayed that, even if you put money in the meter, you're still overstaying. They want the cars to shuffle out of those places. You might disagree with that, but that's the law. So to find out if you were there for more than 2 hours, they would often come by and chalk your tire and put a little mark on your tire using a piece of chalk so they could come by later and see if your car is moved. Because some people would say, oh, you didn't catch that? Yeah, while you weren't looking, I got in my car and I drove around the block and put it right back where it was. And how would you prove otherwise? Well, they would chalk the tires. So a lawsuit was filed in Saginaw, Michigan, and a federal judge said, and a federal court of appeals agreed, that chalking the tires without probable cause or a warrant was in fact a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Search and seizure, that kind of thing. And so now that ruling has come down, what about the other cities that were doing it? Well, it turns out Ann Arbor was doing it. So they're now agreeing to a class action legal settlement offering $1 to anyone who had their car tires chalked by the city's parking enforcement officers. These numbers might get large, but we're not sure yet, and I'll explain that. The city council voted unanimously to okay the settlement to resolve a proposed class action lawsuit brought against the city by a man who complained that the tires of his 2017 Chevrolet Sonic were marked and the city issued him an expired meter parking ticket in 2019. Ann Arbor for years used tire chalking for parking enforcement to see if they could figure out how long cars were parked and to see if they moved. But they stopped the practice in April of 2019 after a Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling in the case of Taylor versus Saginaw. In that case, the court found tire chalking constitutes a search and requires either a warrant or an applicable exception to the Fourth Amendment's search warrant requirement. Now, this man here claimed his Fourth Amendment rights were violated when his car tires were marked just weeks before that court decision, and he held out on paying $70 in fines, and he sued the city in U.S. District Court seeking damages. And his attorney in this case works with the attorney in the case from Saginaw. So it all comes together. The man says that his rights were violated. He filed the lawsuit. After being served with a proposed class action, the city denied the allegations, and they engaged in discovery and then brought an order to dismiss the case. But the judge issued an order in July granting the city's motion for partial summary judgment, while the request for declaratory and injunctive relief and nominal damages remained. So the complaint, I believe, said that they wanted a trial on the amount of damages. And the judge said, from what I've seen, the allegation is that a police officer walked up, or parking enforcement, walked up with a piece of chalk and put a chalk mark on your tire. Okay? No allegations of damage, no allegations of physical injury, no allegations of psychic trauma. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I've had some people go, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Wait, you're suing because someone put a chalk mark on your tire. Well, number one, it's the principle. But number two, here's the thing. I understand it's parking enforcement doing it, but I have a couple cars, and sometimes I take them to like car shows and Cars and Coffee. And if I found somebody marking up my tires with a piece of chalk, I might have a discussion with them about that. Now, a single chalk mark, I admit it's not the end of the world, but they're not asking for $1 million. They're asking for $1 per person, nominal damages. So they want the dollar, and they had pled that they wanted the dollar with interest, but let's not get greedy here. To avoid the cost of continued litigation, the parties now desire to settle the lawsuit, they say, with the city creating a settlement claim process for the plaintiff and other eligible class members to submit claims for $1 each in exchange for the release of all claims against the city. And that's from a resolution passed by the council. And just so you understand, if you got a ticket in Ann Arbor and your tire was chalked, you could opt out of this class action and file a lawsuit of your own. However, a judge has already said, I don't see a lot of damages here. So the $1 is probably the most you're going to get. It's also the least you're going to get, but it just turns out that that's the sweet spot, $1. The assistant city attorney said it's premature for the city to comment on how many people may collect the $1 because the class action settlement is ultimately subject to court approval. The city has not compiled a list of people who may be in the class. And that's the other thing. There's going to be a lot of people who go, yeah, I think I got a ticket in Ann Arbor. I think I'm in this class. And so you might need to go back and find some kind of evidence that you paid that. But keep in mind that the city has data from its parking vendor regarding tickets that were issued and paid, et cetera, and that could verify claims during the claim process. But on the other hand, were all parking tickets issued by that vendor the result of a chalk mark on a tire? Because chances are a lot of them were issued simply because the flag was up on the parking meter. So just because you got a ticket, that doesn't mean necessarily your tires were chalked. I'm real curious to know how many people are going to come out and say, yes, I got a ticket and I believe my tire was chalked. Based on, I'm just curious, did you actually see a chalk mark on your tire? So city records show, and here's where I used to have a call-in radio talk show. Here's where I'd take phone calls. And I would say, there's a number here of how many parking violations are issued each year in the city of Ann Arbor. And the class is going to include all tickets that were issued after a tire was chalked from 2012 to 2019, 7-year period. In that 7-year period, how many tickets do you think are issued each year? Call now. 103,000. 103,000. Now, I know some people are saying, but Steve, New York issues that in an afternoon. Detroit tows that many cars in an afternoon. Ann Arbor is a smaller town compared to some of the larger cities out there. But it's 103,000 parking violations per year for 7 years. That could add up quickly. So it's unclear how many of those cases involved marking tires with chalk. So in case you're curious, because remember, you got to have damages to sue. You can't just sue because, I've been wronged. Okay, what are your damages? Because all the court can do is award you damages. A court can't soothe your soul, And so when somebody messes with your stuff, I'm breaking this down real plain English for you. When someone messes with your stuff, not you, but your stuff, that's called trespass to chattels. Trespass to chattels. Chattels is stuff. It's things you own, your chattels. You don't use that word in conversation, I understand, but it's a legal thing. And trespass to chattels. Now, trespass to property is someone comes onto your property and walks around or does something on your property. That's trespass to your property. Trespass to chattels means somebody did something to your stuff. So, somebody jumps in your car without your permission. That technically is trespass to chattels. But the judge, in her opinion, which I read, said the problem here is that the trespass was harmless. No one said they could put any value on the damage done by the chalk mark on the tire. Now, I know what you're going to say. Getting back to the example of my car, your car at a car show, and let's suppose you've cleaned your car all up and somebody comes by and chalks the tire. Yeah, I got to go wipe that off. I may have to break out the tire shine. Still, what's the damage? Is that even $1? Now, it's an annoyance and it's a frustration, but it's de minimis. De minimis. It means that it's very, very small. It's measurable, which could also be a quantum. But it's measurable, but it's small. But it is something. It is something. And there is a long history in our country of lawsuits and cases that get settled where somebody says, I'm simply looking for an acknowledgement that what you did was wrong. And forcing you to pay me $1 is such a symbolic thing. And so here, the plaintiff has said, give me $1, everybody else in the class $1. And so, that's that. And it looks like they've reached a settlement. So interestingly, I looked up the attorney on the case, and because I didn't recognize his name, but he works with the attorney who handled the Saginaw case, and it's Phil Ellison is the attorney I've spoken to before. I guess the attorney in the case in Ann Arbor is Matthew Granda, but they work together at the same place. So they do a lot of great work. They took that case out of Saginaw up to the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals and got a favorable ruling on it. And so I remember a lot of people arguing about whether or not somebody chalking your tire is a constitutional violation, which calls for a lawsuit. But as a matter of principle, I see it. I absolutely see it as a matter of principle. So I understand that, these cities go, look, we got a problem with parking. Well, nowadays you got all kinds of stuff, including surveillance cameras seemingly everywhere. Instead of having them track who's driving up and down the street, maybe have them also take an eyeball and look at the parking meters. I've also seen parking meters in some cities like Royal Oak, Michigan, where there are no longer the meters that you put the change into and twist the handle and have the flag go up. You have designated spots along a street. There's a kiosk you put money into, and then there's these little tiny posts about, I don't know, so high on the ground, maybe a little higher if you could see my lower hand, which you can't. And those little posts are watching the parking spaces. And so when you roll into a parking space, that thing detects that there's a car there, and within a certain amount of time, it starts the clock running. You walk over and you put money in the meter or into the kiosk, and then it says, oh, this person now is paid, so they get to park here until this time. If you don't move your car, guess what? The thing back here takes a photograph of your license plate and mails you a ticket. And guess how I know? They didn't chalk my tire, but they photographed my plate, which they're allowed to do because the plate is in plain view. So Ann Arbor agrees to class action settlement, giving people $1 if their car tires were chalked back in the day, because the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals has said that is, in fact, a violation of your Fourth Amendment rights. Ryan Stanton wrote that. Ezekiel sent it. Thanks. Questions or comments, put them below. Let's talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Happiness is having a large, loving, close-knit family in another city.